time now for today's edition of the Discourse, and we are focusing on the future of the International Criminal Court as it faces one of the most significant challenges in its history. The court is dealing with the fallout from the dismissal of Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan over allegations of serious misconduct, which he denies. As member states also begin the search for a new prosecutor, the ICC is also facing growing political pressure and renewed scrutiny over its role in delivering international justice. We speak about this ahead of the court, what lies ahead for the court and the future of international criminal justice with Professor Melanie O'Brien. She is Professor of International Law at the University of Western Australia. Professor O'Brien, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me on.
Let's just first start with the dismissal of Karim Khan and the allegations leveled against him. Your thoughts and the evidence that has been presented in that in those allegations that saw him being booted out.
In one way, I can't definitively answer about the evidence because obviously a lot of this has been done behind closed doors. So a lot of the evidence has not been made public. What we do know is that two separate women made separate allegations against the, now former prosecutor Karim Khan, alleging sexual misconduct. So alleging sexual conduct that in one case, for example, escalated over time and none of which was consensual. So these allegations, as I said, came from two different women talking about two different periods in time. And essentially, there was quite a complicated process where these allegations went through multiple different bodies who assessed it. And ultimately, in the end, what resulted was a vote from the Assembly of States Parties. So this assembly is all of the countries that are a party to the International Criminal Court. And ultimately, there was an overwhelming majority vote to remove the prosecutor from his position. I think that in the circumstances, this was probably the wisest decision in the sense that if they had voted to retain Karim Khan's position as prosecutor, there would have always essentially been a bit of a cloud hanging over his head with people wondering, well, did he do it essentially? And so I think it would have created an ongoing issue for the office, but probably also ongoing interpersonal issues when you're thinking about people who actually work for the court and particularly working in that office.
And as you say that it probably is a wisest decision, even probably from a PR perspective, but one does wonder, with the ICC having been established on the premise of that no individual is above the law, and here we see it facing questions over leadership, governance, and institutional credibility. So going forward, is this going to be just a matter more about recruitment or a challenge around profound constitutional tests of its history and what it represents?
I mean, you're absolutely spot on. One of the things that they've always said about who the prosecutor has to be is someone with the highest level of integrity. And so I think, again, as you say, this is one of the reasons why that ultimately was the right decision. So what we're going to see going forward is the need for an election, because under the Rome Statute, so that's the founding document of the court, but also the rules of procedure and evidence, that the only way a prosecutor can be appointed is through an electoral process, being nominated by states and then being elected. And that process is designed to be part of a robust system to ensure that the people who are nominated, but ultimately the person who is appointed to the role, are those not only of, obviously, really importantly, having really astute legal minds and having excellent legal knowledge and practice, but also to be a person of the highest integrity.
And we know that the deputy is acting in the position at the moment, but in the pursuit of a new chief prosecutor, given what you've also just said, is going to go beyond the qualities, because we live in a world now where it's marked by sanctions, competing great power interests, and also accusations of selective justice. So, how is an independent prosecutor whose decisions who would be said to be guided solely by law and evidence going to navigate these waters?
It is incredibly challenging. And, we are talking about what is really an amazing job. When you think about it in the legal profession and in the field of international law, this is one of the most important jobs. It's highly significant in terms of, this is the person who brings charges for international crimes that are incredibly serious and impact millions of people worldwide every day. So it's such an important role, and it's really important that we have someone with the knowledge, the skills, and the integrity. But what you're looking at the moment is a real challenge. And normally you would think people would jump at the chance to have this role. But honestly, what I would ask at the moment is who would put their hand up for such a challenging role? It would have to be someone who is really ready to face significant challenges. And the first one being that the United States has sanctioned many members of the court, but certainly including the prosecutor. So whoever gets nominated and appointed will likely, depending on when that is in time, be immediately sanctioned by the United States, which, as I understand, practically for those people living under sanctions is incredibly difficult in terms of literally just their day to day lives, having access to bank accounts, these kinds of things. So there's that to begin with. But secondly, you're right, there are these political issues that are swirling around the court at the moment. Things like the suggestion that, oh, will a new prosecutor remove the arrest warrants related to the Gaza investigation, which obviously they should not do that. These arrest warrants have been brought on the basis of evidence of the commission of international crimes, which is the job of the prosecutor's office. And so, I would be extremely worried if someone is appointed and then simply withdraws arrest warrants for the sake of politics, because that's not what the prosecutor should do. They are supposed to be independent. They are not supposed to be representing any one country. And so they should be doing their job with independence based on what are the crimes happening on the ground and who is committing them.
Answer the question about whether or not the court has become politicized beyond the challenges that it faces. I mean, we've seen various African countries that have withdrawn from the Rome Statute as as a result of what they see as a lack of integrity of the ICC. What are your thoughts about the criticism that it faces, and just also its track record? Is it urgently in need of reform?
So let's start with the African criticism. So the initial criticism years ago that started was that the court was being Afrocentric, that its cases were focused on countries from Africa. And the reason behind that is because those countries referred themselves to the court. That's why it started that way. It wasn't essentially even the court's choice. That's how it happened. The state said, we want you to have a look at these crimes going on in our territory. So that's how it started. The criticism has changed and has now become that the court is too non-Western centric, like all of the cases are non-Western cases. And, I think that's really challenging because, again, there are a lot of self-referrals. They're also just basing it on where are the crimes being committed on the ground. They have to look at that. So, I mean, Ukraine, they're investigating Ukraine. They're investigating the crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine as well. But they have spread throughout the world to look at where are the crimes happening on the ground. In terms of thinking about the withdrawals, we've also got some withdrawals outside of Africa as well, countries like the Philippines or Hungary or Venezuela and some of the countries in Africa. And one of the things I'm going to be blunt about is say, take a look at who is withdrawing. They are states that are governed by authoritarian leaders who themselves are responsible for human rights abuses and possibly international crimes. And the reason they are withdrawing is because they do not themselves want to be held accountable for any atrocities that they may already be committing or may do so in the future.
Okay, so what would be the first port of call in reforming and ensuring that the ICC actually meets the needs of this new, and I say new because in some cases they say so-called new multipolar world?
In terms of reform, I'm not suggesting there's a need for any reform, not significant structural reform anyway. Uh, because, as I said, when we're thinking about the criticisms and the withdrawals, they're related to states that are themselves committing crimes and individuals who don't want to be held accountable for them. So we know what a world looks like without international criminal courts and tribunals, including the ICC. We've seen it. We saw it for decades beforehand. And that's a world of impunity. So this is a court that does bring some justice to people. And having been engaged with victims of cases that are before the court, this accountability and justice is so incredibly important for those people. The only thing that I think actually should be reformed is that there's a desperate need for more funding for the court, because the court has taken on more and more investigations and prosecutions over the years. And they simply, honestly, the bottom line is that they don't have enough funding to really be able to comprehensively deliver the work that they do in terms of thinking about the sheer quantity of crimes, the quantity of perpetrators. And so, obviously, more financial support from the state parties would be warranted.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. And that there is Professor um, Professor O'Brien, Melanie O'Brien. She's Professor of International Law at the University of Western Australia.
Channel Africa is